It's strange how two simple words on a tombstone could confuse the world. Don't try. That's what they etched into the granite above the grave of Charles Bukowski. 2 words, no explanation, no comfort, just a punch in the gut. And people have argued about them ever since. What did he mean? Was it sarcasm, nihilism, a joke, a warning? But what if those words carry more wisdom than any self-help book ever written? What if don't try is not a surrender to laziness, but the beginning of something far more radical, far more liberating? Because the truth is, most of us are trying way too hard, not just to succeed, but to be accepted, admired, validated, perfect. And in the process, we lose the very thing that made us worth knowing in the first place. Bukowski saw that, and he rejected it with every fiber of his being. Let's unpack the meaning behind this brutal, beautiful philosophy, and why understanding it could change the way you live forever. Charles Bukowski was not a man you'd expect to become a literary legend. He was a drunk, a gambler, a post office clerk, a man who spent most of his life in the shadows, scribbling poems on torn paper, long before anyone cared who he was. He didn't wear nice clothes, he didn't go to book signings, he wasn't trying to be a role model. In fact, for most of his life, he wasn't trying to be anything. And that's the paradox. Because while everyone else was desperately trying to be someone, Bukowski was simply being. Charles Bukowski was a German-American poet, novelist, and short story writer, born Heinrich Karl Bukowski in Andernach, Germany, in 1920. He immigrated to the United States with his family at the age of 2, settling in Los Angeles, a city that would later become the gritty backdrop for much of his work. Raised by a physically abusive father and a distant mother during the Great Depression, Bukowski grew up feeling like an outsider. His early life was marked by poverty, alcoholism, and deep social alienation, all of which would later fuel the raw, confessional tone of his writing. Charles Bukowski struggled for decades as an unknown writer, working menial jobs and facing constant rejection. He didn't chase fame or success. Instead, he wrote compulsively from a raw, honest place, simply because he couldn't not write. He never polished his work to fit literary expectations or forced himself to produce for approval. His breakthrough came when small underground magazines and independent publishers recognized the brutal authenticity in his unfiltered voice. At around age 50, his first book was published, not because he tried to become a successful writer, but because he remained true to himself and his unique style. Bukowski's success was a result of embracing his natural flow and voice rather than striving to meet external standards. This perfectly exemplifies his don't try philosophy. Stop forcing and pretending, and let your genuine self emerge. Bukowski wrote about what he saw, what he felt, what he hated, what he loved, and people connected with it, not because it was polished, but because it was real, raw, honest, ugly even, but it was alive. So when Bukowski said, "Don't try," he wasn't saying don't care. He wasn't saying give up. He was saying stop forcing things, stop pretending, stop chasing a version of success that suffocates your soul. Let it come if it's going to come. Let it die if it's going to die. Do what burns inside you or do nothing at all. That's the essence of it. See, most people spend their lives climbing ladders they don't even want to be on, hustling for jobs they hate, performing in relationships that feel like prison sentences, working out to impress people they secretly resent, living in cities that steal their joy, and all of it in the name of effort, of trying. But what are you really trying for? To be loved, to be remembered, to be good enough. Bukowski's "Don't Try" is a call to drop the act, to quit the performance, to stop manufacturing passion and just follow it, to create because you have to, not because you want followers or praise or book deals. You can feel it, can't you? that tension between what you think you should be doing and what your soul is screaming for you to do. Bukowski believed in honoring that scream, even if it ruined your reputation, even if it left you broke, even if no one clapped when you finished. He wrote poems that got rejected hundreds of times. He got into bar fights. He sabotaged relationships. He lived with the consequences of being honest in a world that worships masks. But he wouldn't fake it, not for a second. And because of that, his work hit like a freight train. Now, don't misunderstand. Don't try doesn't mean don't work hard. Bukowski wrote thousands of poems, dozens of books, and worked thankless jobs for years to survive. But none of it was about status. None of it was for the show. He didn't try to write like Hemingway. He didn't try to be polite or likable or even sane. He wrote what he needed to write, and he trusted that the people who needed to hear it would find it. And they did. So many people today are exhausted. Not because they're doing too much, but because they're doing the wrong things. Because they're constantly trying to be someone they're not. Because they're living for applause instead of truth. And that's why Don't Try hits so hard. It forces you to ask the question, what would you do if you stopped trying to impress everyone? If you weren't trying to make it, what would you make? If you weren't trying to fit in, who would you be? Bukowski's life was messy, chaotic, often self-destructive, but it was his. He didn't borrow it from anyone. He didn't filter it for social media. He didn't edit it for comfort. And you can argue with his choices, but not with his authenticity. There's something terrifying and thrilling about that. To stop trying is to stop pretending. It's to allow yourself to fail honestly instead of succeed dishonestly. It's to stop polishing your image and start trusting your instincts. It's to do what makes you feel alive even if no one else understands. And it's not easy, because the world doesn't want you to be real. It wants you to be acceptable, marketable, predictable. But those aren't human goals. They're branding strategies. And when your life becomes a brand, your soul becomes a product. Bukowski refused that transaction. That's why his grave says, "Don't try." It's a warning, a dare, a philosophy, and it's still misunderstood by people looking for shortcuts to success. But that's not what it is. It's about surrender, not to laziness, but to the truth. You don't need to try to be a great artist. You just need to be one. You don't need to try to be a good person. You just need to stop lying. You don't need to try to be happy. You need to stop chasing things that make you miserable. Don't try means this. If it doesn't come from the fire inside you, it's probably not worth doing. Because the people who change the world aren't usually the ones with the most effort. They're the ones with the most clarity. They're not running around trying to be someone. They're simply being who they already are. Think about that. How much of your life is driven by effort, and how much is driven by energy? Effort is when you push. Energy is when you flow. Effort is forcing yourself to act right. Energy is letting yourself act real. Bukowski's writing was all energy. It flowed. It bled. It stank of life. That's why it worked. He didn't take creative writing classes. He didn't study literature in a prestigious college. He drank cheap wine and worked a soul-killing job and wrote in his ratty apartment because he couldn't not write. That's the don't try philosophy. If you're trying to force yourself to write a book, maybe you're not meant to write one. Yet. If you're trying to be successful like someone else, maybe you're meant to succeed in your own weird, ugly, brilliant way. If you're trying to love someone who doesn't love you back, maybe it's time to stop trying and just feel the loss and move on. When something is right, it doesn't need to be forced. That doesn't mean it won't be hard, but it will feel true. And in a world of fake smiles and filtered lives, truth is the most beautiful rebellion. Don't try is not a slogan for slackers. It's a battle cry for the real ones. The ones who would rather be rejected for being honest than celebrated for being fake. The ones who wake up at 3 a.m. with a poem in their chest and write it down because they can't sleep. The ones who paint, sing, build, dance, scream. Not for money, not for fame, but because they must. The ones who are sick of trying to fit into a system that rewards mediocrity and punishes originality. Bukowski wasn't a saint. He was deeply flawed. But maybe that's what makes his message so powerful. Because he didn't write it from a stage. He wrote it from the dirt, from the alleys, from the broken places most people try to avoid. He lived the consequences of don't try, and he paid the price. But he also found something the rest of us are still looking for: freedom. That's what this is all about. Freedom from expectations, from performance, from self-betrayal. The freedom to say what you really think, to live how you really want, to make what you really love. No more chasing trends, no more faking enthusiasm, no more smiling for the camera when you feel like screaming into the void. Just truth, and whatever comes with it. That's what Bukowski stood for, and that's what don't try really means. So here's the question. What are you trying too hard to be? What lie are you maintaining out of fear? What truth are you denying out of shame? Because the moment you stop trying to be perfect, you give yourself permission to be real. And real is where the magic happens. That's where the art is. That's where the love is. That's where the life is. And it doesn't matter if it's messy, or unpopular, or misunderstood. What matters is that it's yours. Your words, your pain, your joy, your voice. Stop trying to fit someone else's mold and start breaking it. Let it crack, let it shatter, let it burn if it must. But whatever you do, don't fake it. Don't try. Live instead. In the end, Charles Bukowski didn't become a legend because he hustled harder, networked better, or followed some polished formula for success. He made it because he stopped pretending. He wrote what was raw. He lived how he felt. He let go of trying to impress anyone. And in doing so, he became impossible to ignore. Success came not because he chased it, but because he didn't. By the time he died in 1994, Bukowski had published over 45 books of poetry and prose, including his celebrated novels Post Office, Ham on Rye, and Women. His works were translated into dozens of languages. He inspired a cult following around the world, and the film Barfly, based on his life, was released to critical acclaim. In 1986, he received the Silver Reel Award from the San Francisco Film Society. But Bukowski didn't write for the awards or the fame. He wrote because he had to, because it was the most honest thing he could do. That's the paradox of don't try. It doesn't mean be lazy. It means stop forcing what isn't you. Stop grasping. Let it come, naturally, honestly, painfully if it must. Because when you stop trying to be something, you finally become everything you were meant to be. Just like Bukowski. If Bukowski's don't try philosophy speaks to you, don't just let it be another idea. Live it. Stop forcing who you think you should be. Stop chasing approval and perfection. Start being unapologetically you. What would happen if you stopped trying and simply showed up as your true self today? Drop a comment below and share your story. How will you embrace the freedom of not trying? And if this message hit home, hit that like button and subscribe for more truth that cuts through the noise. Your authentic life is waiting. Don't try, just be.